The Beast and the Candy. In a small house along the edge of a village, there lived a young boy with his parents. He had no siblings and slept in a big room on the second floor. One night, he was lying awake in bed, staring up at his ceiling. He was hungry and not sleepy at all. He had eaten supper, but had not had any dessert. His parents could almost never afford dessert, as his father's wood-carving business was not doing well, and they almost never had enough money to buy things they wanted. Instead, his parents chose to use their money on the meat they ate for supper. The boy's father labored out in the barn all day, making all kinds of wooden carvings. He used the barn like a shop where people could come in and buy them. But someone was breaking into the barn at night and stealing the carvings. His father had begun to keep them in the house overnight, but they still had to be moved back out to the barn during the day, and it was a lot of work to move all of them each morning and night. They also took up a lot of space. The boy wanted something sweet. He couldn't stop thinking about all the delicious things he wanted to eat. All he could think about were lollipops, taffy, cotton candy, and chocolate. The more he thought about them, the more he wanted them. Suddenly, he heard a noise coming from his window across the room. It was a tapping sound. Somebody was tapping their finger against the glass. The boy was afraid of the dark, so he always had a candle burning on one of the tables in his room at night, and it dimly lit the area between his bed and the window. But the curtains were closed, and he couldn't see who was tapping. He slowly got out of bed, picked up the candle, and stepped closer to the window. With his other hand, he pulled open the curtains. There was a giant face looking in at him with wide yellow eyes and a big grin, revealing long, sharp teeth. It was a hairy beast, and it was tapping on the window with one of its giant pointy claws. The boy almost screamed, but then saw something held in the beast's hand as it tapped on the glass. It was a big, red, shiny piece of candy. It was inside a colorfully striped plastic wrapper that glistened in the light from the candle. The piece of candy itself seemed to glitter. It looked so sweet, so delicious. The beast stopped tapping and held the candy in its palm, smiling even bigger. The boy knew that the window was locked, and he was thankful. This beast had a mouth that could bite off his entire head. It was a massive creature, and it was terrifying. But it was offering him something delicious, almost as if it had known he had been wishing for it. Surely, if this beast meant to harm him, it would have broken the window, but instead, it smiled and held up an offering. The boy made up his mind. He slowly unlocked the window and pulled it open just a little. The beast lowered the piece of candy to the opening and waited, still smiling. The boy reached out and took the piece of candy, then shut the window and locked it again. The beast then lowered down out of sight. The boy pulled the curtain back closed, walked back over to the table, and set the candle back down. He looked at the shiny piece of hard candy in his hand, begging to be tasted. He couldn't stop himself as he quickly unwrapped it and popped it in his mouth. It was exquisite. It was so decadent, so unbelievably sweet, that it was almost too good to be true. It tasted like watermelon, but even better. The boy chewed it up, and it was gone, but the sweet taste still lingered on his tongue. As he began to make his way back to his bed, he noticed that he was feeling sleepier than usual. It must have been from finally indulging in a treat that he had so been craving. He was content. He decided to hide the wrapper under his bed, and after lying back down, he fell fast asleep. The next morning, as the boy was getting out of bed, he noticed that he felt just a bit weak. Perhaps he was getting sick. It didn't matter, though, because he was excited to tell his parents about what had happened the previous night. But when he did, they were not excited like he was. His mother reminded him that he should never be taking things from strangers, and his father told him that if he heard anything outside the window again, to not go look, but call for him instead. He would bring his shotgun. The boy's parents made him promise that he would keep the window locked and not go near it. He promised. The next night, the boy was once again lying awake in bed, wondering if he would get another visit from the beast with the candy. The more he thought about the treat the beast had brought him the previous night, the more he wanted another. Sure enough, not long after he had begun to think about this, he heard a tapping noise on his window across the room. The boy thought about calling his father, but remembered the delicious piece of candy the beast had kindly offered him before. Perhaps it would do the same again. The boy climbed out of bed, still feeling a bit weak, and picked up his candle. He made his way to the window and pulled open the curtain. Again, the beast with the yellow eyes and the big, toothy grin stared in at him. In the hand it was using to tap on the window, the boy's eyes lit up at the sight of another piece of candy. This one was a bright orange, glittering with sugary sweetness, wrapped in plastic with shiny rainbow swirls all over it. This candy glistened even brighter than the last. The boy hesitated for a moment, but unlocked the window once again and slid it open just enough to reach for the candy. The beast lowered the treat in its palm down to where the boy could reach it. He reached his hand out the window, grabbed the piece of candy, and pulled it inside. He pressed the window shut, locked it, and the beast once again retreated downward out of sight. The boy closed the curtain and set the candle down again on the table. He eagerly unwrapped the piece of candy and stuffed it in his mouth. This time, the taste was even better. It tasted like an orange, but it was tastier and even sweeter. It was better than any candy he had ever tasted in his life, even better than the piece from the night before. It was deliciously tart and bursting with flavor. Before long, he had chewed it all up, and it was gone, leaving him with a pleasant, lingering taste on his tongue. The boy suddenly felt even weaker. He was sleepy again, and his body felt heavy. It was probably from all the sugar. Sometimes he felt sleepy after eating dessert, and this candy was so much sweeter than anything he had tasted before that his weariness did not come as a surprise. He stumbled back to his bed, hid the wrapper underneath, got under the covers, and fell fast asleep. In the morning, the boy's weariness had not gone away. His body still felt heavy and weak. He told his parents about it, but they weren't sure what to think. They suggested that perhaps he hadn't slept enough. Then they asked him if he had heard anything outside his window last night. The boy did not want to tell them the truth. He didn't want to do anything that would prevent him from receiving any more delicious candy. The beast was friendly, and his parents would not understand. After all, the beast was the one giving him what his parents couldn't. So, the boy lied. He told his parents that he hadn't heard anything, and that what he had told them had happened was probably only a dream. Later that evening, the boy's father asked for his help in moving the wooden carvings into the house for the night. But after moving one of them, the boy decided that he wasn't feeling up to it. He was weak, and he couldn't lift them very well. His father tried to explain to him that it was important to get all the carvings into the house before they all went to bed, but the boy walked away. He didn't want to hear it. His parents weren't the ones giving him dessert at night. That night, as the boy lay awake in bed, his father sat in his room with him, watching the window with a shotgun. The boy was becoming upset, worrying that his father would scare the beast away, or even worse, kill it. Then he would never get any more candy. Finally, while after the boy had pretended to fall asleep, he heard his father leave the room. Some time passed, and the boy got an idea. He weakly stumbled out of bed and over to the window across the room. He unlocked it, leaving the curtains closed. He then climbed back into bed and lied there, waiting. He was getting tired of moving around so much. It was becoming hard to do. It would be easier if the beast could come inside to give him the candy, so he wouldn't have to bother moving across the room with the candle and opening the window each time. He was a bit nervous at the thought of leaving the window unlocked for the beast to enter his room, but it was clear that it meant no harm. Before long, the boy heard the sound of his window slowly sliding open. He turned his head to look, and in the dim light from the candle, he saw the long, hairy arms of the beast reach inside through the curtains. Its pointy claws gently touched the wooden floor, and through the curtains emerged the yellow eyes and the large grin with the sharp teeth. The beast looked at him in the dark from across the room as it climbed inside and stood up. It was so massive that the ceiling was too low for it to stand up all the way, and it had to lean over. The boy felt the hairs on his body standing on end as he stared at the monster standing in his bedroom. Now that he could see the whole body, it was even more frightening. It slowly and quietly stepped a bit closer and held out its hand, pinching something between its long, sharp claws. It was an even larger piece of blue, sugar-coated candy wrapped in plastic with rainbow swirls all over it, tied at the ends with silky red bows. The beast set the candy down on the floor and slowly retreated backward, exiting the window, its eyes never leaving the boy's until its face disappeared between the curtains. Then came the sound of the window gently sliding closed. Excited, the boy weakly climbed out of bed and stumbled over to the piece of candy on the floor. Even in the dim light, the wrapper and the candy it held inside was bright and glittery. The candy itself shined and glistened with an entrancing blue color that almost seemed to glow on its own. He could already smell the sweetness coming from it. He unwrapped it as quickly as he could and popped it in his mouth, immediately overtaken by its stunning blueberry flavor. It was even better than just plain blueberry. It was magical. It was divine. His taste buds almost felt as though they were melting under the serene, mouth-watering bliss. He never would have thought something could taste so wonderful. Soon enough, it was gone. Now the boy almost couldn't stand back up. He managed, however, and slowly trudged back over to his bed. He slipped the wrapper underneath, climbed back under the covers on top, and fell asleep almost instantly. The next day, the boy could barely get out of bed. He nearly fell while walking down the stairs, and his parents began to realize that something was wrong. They helped him back into his bed and had the doctor pay him a visit. However, the doctor could not figure out what was wrong. He did not have a fever, and everything about him seemed healthy and normal. The boy's parents became worried, but all the boy could think about was what new treat the beast might offer him that following night. Would it be lemon? Would it be strawberry? Or perhaps it would even be chocolate. The boy's mouth began to water at the captivating thought. That night, after both his parents had finally left his room, the boy waited. He knew the window was still unlocked and couldn't wait to taste what delicious treat the beast would bring next. Soon enough, the window quietly slid open, and in climbed the beast. It grinned even bigger and stepped even closer. It held out its hand and placed on the floor something round, tied at the top with a silky golden bow that shined beautifully in the candlelight. When the boy looked closer, he almost couldn't believe his eyes. It was chocolate. The beast slowly retreated backward out the window, staring at the boy until its face disappeared between the curtains and the window gently slid shut. This time, the beast had left the candy even closer to the boy's bed. Slowly and feebly, he slid out of bed onto the floor and crawled over to the chocolate. This time he smelled its sweet and trancing aroma before he even reached it. It was a ball of flawless, milky chocolate with brown caramel drizzled in perfect swirls all over. It was so enticing. It was irresistible. The boy weakly but eagerly untied the ribbon and opened the wrapper, and at once his nostrils were filled with such a captivating chocolate aroma that his hand seemed to work on its own, desperately grabbing the chocolatey ball and stuffing it in his mouth. He bit down, and the ball of chocolate softly broke open, filling his mouth with a smooth, creamy, absolutely hypnotizing chocolate filling with a touch of caramel. He felt as though his entire body was melting, and it felt marvelous. Then it was gone, leaving the chocolatey caramel taste lingering in his mouth. This time, the boy became so weak that he struggled to grab hold of the wrapper and crawl back to his bed with it. His body was so heavy that after he slowly slid the wrapper under his bed, he almost couldn't climb back up onto it. He felt as though he was trying to move in quicksand. It took a great deal of effort, and he struggled for several moments before finally managing to pull himself back up onto his bed and slide under the covers. He fell asleep mere seconds after his head touched the pillow. In the morning, the boy almost couldn't move at all. He struggled to speak and was never able to climb out of bed. Eventually, his mother came up to check on him. After seeing his condition, his parents were so worried that they paid the doctor extra money, all the rest of the money they had, to stay with him and watch over him all day and late into the evening. But the doctor could still not find anything wrong with him. His heartbeat was normal, his skin looked and felt normal, and his eyes were working just fine. Eventually, the doctor left, and the boy's parents were devastated. His father had to carry him to use the bathroom, and both the boy's parents kept checking on him into the night. Eventually, they left him to rest. The boy lied there in his dimly lit room in the middle of the night, staring over at his window. If last night's treat was that amazing, then tonight's treat would be one to die for. He waited, his mouth watering more and more. Finally, he heard the sound of the window gently sliding open, and in climbed the tall, hairy, grinning beast with yellow eyes. It quietly began stepping across the room over to his bed. It stepped even closer than before, but still not close enough. Slowly and weakly, the boy reached out his hand, eagerly waiting for whatever mouth-watering treat was in store. The beast stepped even closer, and it was then that the boy saw it was not carrying anything. It continued to stare down at him, grinning even bigger, its lips curling up as it began to open its mouth into a gaping smile of razor-sharp teeth. But there was no candy in its hand. Instead, the beast grabbed the boy's arm and bit it off at the shoulder. The boy tried to scream, but he could only let out a feeble rasp. The beast grabbed him by the throat. He tried to fight back, but he was far too weak. The beast opened its mouth even bigger and bit off the boy's head. Then it bit off his other arm and each of his legs. Piece by piece, bite by bite, the beast devoured the boy.